We are jumping right into the explainer today, and we're looking at what is arguably the world's most enduring maritime mystery, Flight 19 and the myth of the Bermuda Triangle. You already know the lore, so we are skipping the fluff, stripping away the fiction, and looking strictly at the documented facts of an event that literally changed history. So, what actually swallowed 27 men without a trace on December 5th, 1945? Aliens? Time travel? The lost continent of Atlantis? Whenever the Bermuda Triangle comes up, those are the pop culture tropes that immediately spring to mind, right? They've completely gripped the public's imagination for decades, popping up in everything from Steven Spielberg blockbusters to Scooby-Doo cartoons. But underneath all of those wild, fantastical ideas lies a very real and incredibly tragic question. What actually took down 27 men and 6 aircraft on a single winter afternoon?
It's actually fascinating to see the huge gap between what society wants to believe and what the evidence actually tells us. To really demystify this legend, we've got to look past the supernatural hype. The real story of the Bermuda Triangle doesn't start with a UFO. It starts with disorientation, rough seas, broken compasses, and a catastrophic chain of human error.
Section 1, a routine training flight. Picture this. It's December 5th, 1945. At 2:10 p.m., 5 Grumman TBF Avenger torpedo bombers take off from Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale for what was called Navigation Problem Number 1. This was supposed to be a completely standard, totally routine run. They were going to fly out 56 miles to practice dropping bombs on some rocks near Bimini in the Bahamas, head north, and then just turn back east to base. The whole thing was scheduled to take roughly 2 hours and 40 minutes. Simple enough, right? But here is where we need to remember the human cost, which so often gets completely lost in the myth. There were 14 men aboard those 5 Avengers. They weren't just abstract numbers. You had seasoned World War II combat veterans, like the flight leader, 28-year-old Lieutenant C.C. Taylor, who had over 2,500 hours of flight time under his belt. And right alongside him were young trainees and crew members, literally teenagers in some cases. Section 2. Losing direction. So how does a routine exercise go so horribly wrong? Well, the clock is ticking, and out over the ocean, fuel is a highly finite resource. About an hour and a half after takeoff, at 3:45 p.m., another pilot in the area named Lieutenant Robert F. Cox intercepts a deeply concerning transmission. Things escalate quickly. By 4:25 p.m., Taylor is on the radio, desperately asking if anyone has a radar screen that could pick up their location. But this is 1945, and that kind of technology wasn't just readily available to them. The real turning point here is a truly chilling radio transmission. Listen to what Taylor actually said. Quote, "Both my compasses are out. I am over land, but it's broken. I'm sure I'm in the Florida Keys, but I don't know how far down, and I don't know how to get to Fort Lauderdale." Think about that for a second. For a flight that had just taken off from Fort Lauderdale, heading east to the Bahamas, being way down in the Florida Keys was geographically impossible in that time frame. But Taylor was a recent transfer from Miami. He was navigating completely unfamiliar terrain, his compasses had totally failed him, and utter disorientation had set in. Now, Lieutenant Cox realized something was very wrong. He advised Taylor to fly north and even offered to fly toward him to help guide them back. But Taylor, mistakenly believing he had somehow regained his bearings, told Cox, "Don't come after me." Pop culture mythmakers have totally twisted this phrase over the years, making it sound like Taylor was warning Cox away from some sinister paranormal force. But the reality is just heartbreakingly simple. Taylor incorrectly thought he knew where he was. Section 3. Fatal Decisions. As the sunny afternoon gave way to winter darkness, rain squalls, and rough seas, the situation became incredibly dire. Around 5:15 p.m., Taylor agreed to fly west to try and hit the coast. But here's the agonizing irony of the whole timeline. Around 6 p.m., ground units finally calculated a navigational fix for Flight 19. They figured out the planes were actually way out over the Atlantic, well north of the Bahamas. But by the time they pinpointed this location, they could no longer reach the planes on the radio to warn them. And then at 6:04 p.m., we get the fatal turning point. Because Taylor incorrectly thought he was in the Gulf of Mexico, he assumed that flying west and not hitting land meant they hadn't gone far enough east yet. So he ordered his squadron to turn around and fly east. It's devastating. As ground crews were literally flipping on lights up and down the Florida coast, hoping to visually guide them in, Flight 19 was unknowingly flying away from safety, pushing deeper into the dark, stormy, open Atlantic. The last faint contact from the squadron came at 7:04 p.m., and it wasn't even to the mainland. It was one of the other pilots, Ensign Joseph Bossi, calling out to Taylor. There was no response. At this point, their fuel gauges would have been hovering right near zero. Out in those rough, unfavorable seas, it's almost certain the 5 planes ditched into the dark ocean, bringing this claustrophobic nightmare to a silent end. Section 4. The Doomed Rescue. But the nightmare wasn't actually over. The rescue effort that immediately followed compounded the tragedy. At 7:27 p.m., a Martin PBM 5 Mariner search plane departed with 13 crew members, heading out toward Flight 19's presumed location. But there's a crucial detail here. Aviators colloquially called these Mariners flying gas tanks because they were notoriously prone to onboard fires. Barely 20 minutes after they took off, a ship in the area reported seeing a massive 100-foot burst of flames in the night sky. By 7:57 p.m., the Mariner had fallen completely off radio contact. When searchers finally reached the site of the flames, there was nothing left. 13 more lives, just gone.
To give you a sense of scale, the Navy launched what was called the most extensive search ever undertaken along the Atlantic seaboard. Over the next 5 days, more than 200 planes scoured 200,000 square miles of the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico. That's a massive, massive area. And they found absolutely nothing. No wreckage, no life rafts. The 27 men from the Avengers and the Mariner were just gone.
Section 5. Legacy of the Lost. The Navy's initial investigation essentially put the blame on Lieutenant Taylor, concluding that he suffered something akin to a mental aberration. But his mother, Catherine Taylor, absolutely refused to accept that ruling. She fought tirelessly, constantly pointing out procedural failures by the ground crew. It was a heartbreaking, tenacious fight that brought those abstract military statistics back to a poignant human story. And you know what? It worked. She eventually forced the Navy to officially revise the cause of the loss to reasons or causes unknown in 1947. Her fight also brought to light a tragic what-if from that afternoon. Remember Lieutenant Cox, the pilot who first intercepted Taylor's distress calls? Well, when Cox landed back at the base, he immediately asked for permission to take up a standby aircraft, a ready plane, to go out and find the squadron. His request was flat out denied. Officials were waiting to get a solid location fix, and they didn't want to complicate radio communications any further. It was a massive missed opportunity, one that frustrated Cox for the rest of his life. So, with the Navy officially closing the book and declaring the causes unknown, a massive information void was created, and sensationalists rushed right in to fill it. As early as 1950, the Associated Press erroneously claimed the flight vanished in complete radio silence, completely ignoring Taylor's actual logs. By the 1960s and 70s, magazines had coined the term Bermuda Triangle, and authors were just straight-up fabricating quotes about Taylor seeing UFOs. This entire myth-making machine peaked in 1977, when Spielberg's movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind cemented the legend by showing the pilots being abducted by aliens. But when we look at the facts, they are firmly grounded in environmental reality. As the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration clearly points out, there is absolutely zero evidence that disappearances occur with any greater frequency in the Bermuda Triangle than in any other large, well-traveled area of the ocean. The truth of Flight 19 isn't about aliens or portals. It's a story of broken compasses, powerful Gulf Stream currents, and fatal human miscalculations. It is a tragedy of reality, not the supernatural. Which brings us to a final, somewhat provocative thought to leave you with today. As one of our sources aptly noted, the sea guards well her secrets. We have the radio logs, we know the exact weather conditions, we know about the doomed, highly flammable Mariner plane, we have the facts. Yet, the alien abduction and time travel stories persist. So why do we, as a society, so strongly prefer fantastical, supernatural explanations over accepting the sobering, completely preventable reality of human loss? It's something to think about the next time you hear a modern myth spreading like wildfire. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and always keep questioning the stories you're told.